Hello my friend, welcome in Light Code channel and welcome in a new tutorial. In this tutorial we talk about session. What is the session, how we can gather data about session, and how we can show this data and how we can delete the session. Session provide a way to store information about the user across the multiple prerequisites. All information about session is stored in the file session, which is stored in the config session. I create the PHP, the laravel project, blank laravel project, and I will show you where is the config, where is the session file in the config. Here, I think config, and this session, this file stored any data about the session. This file is by default drivers. Laravel provide for us many drivers for interacting with session data, like file, cookies, the database, memcached, and DynamoDB and array. For interacting with the session, there are two primary ways of working with the session. Let me show you that. Here, the session driver here, interacting with it. There are two primary ways of working with session: global session helper and or via request instance. So for starting the work, I need to create a new controller, and this controller we need to add some function like how we can gather information about session, and how we can store, how we can show the session, and how we can delete the session. Let me start the work and follow me. First of all, I create a new, clear this, create a new controller, PHP artisans make controller, and we name it session controller. This create for us new controller. Let me close that. And here, this controller, we need some information add for starting the work. They use authorize it controller, the session controller. I need this. So I go here, and for gathering data about the session, we can use this global session, or we can use the request instance. I will use this session global session, so I copy this here from this here and go to the Laravel project and added this here, and create a new function for starting the work. Public function. I name it the store session. Store, for example, session, and have the request and $request variables, and double curly bracket. And also we need to create another function for show or display the information which gathered by this function. So I say for show data, session data, public function, I name it, for example, show for saving time and for explicitity. And we need to another function, we name it delete session. So for delete session, I named it, for example, public function delete session, for example, our request and $$ request. And calibrate this. Okay. As you know, for these functions we need to create some route. So I here create 3 route. Route, for example, for store, and route for showing the data, and route for delete the session data. Get, I name it is store session, and here I call the session controller and name it the class, and we need to call the store session. Go back to the session controller and copy this store session, Control C, and go to the back to the in at here, Control V. And we need, for saving time, I copy this again, Control C, and here I copied it here, Control and Control. Here I say for storing session, data session, or for excuse me, show session, and here for delete session. For example, for I named it show session, show data, show session, and here I need add this, and here I will name it delete session. I call function we need here. I go back to the controller and the delete session, store session, and so I need show session. Let me session, so session, show session, so session, and here I will show session, Control V, and here delete session. I think delete session. Let me cross check. Delete session. I copy this from here, Control C, and go back to the web and added this here, Control V. Okay. Now for control, I send some information for check if the route is work fine or not. I say, for example, VR, control VR, and for example, say the data session will be stored here, and here I say return VR $VR, and what happened? Yes, I must close this comment, and for the deleting or for showing, Control V. Excuse me for that. Deleting session. Okay, I copy this from here, Control C, and copy it here and here. Control V, and show will be a show here. Show, and will be delete. Okay, for test, I will go to the browser and I call this route, for example, store session. Control C and go back to the browser here, and I say Control V. This working fine. The data session will be stored here. After that, I will go here in the again and show very difficult show, not need session. Show, Control C, and come back to the browser and add this here, Control V, and hit enter. The session data will be shown here, and after that, for testing, we go delete route URL, Control C, and come back to the browser, and we edit it here, Control V, and yes, all route and our function working fine. So in the next step, we will add the session helper and request helper for gathering data, and after that, for the showing data, and in the end, we will create the delete for deleting the session. My friend, as you know, for gathering some data about the session, we need to use we will use the helper session, this helper here. We will use this, and we will store the data we need from the request. So I will use this here. I go here, copy this from here for saving time, Control C, and go back to this function, store the session. I remove this, and here, and this, and say, for example, Control V, session. This part, this name of the session, for example, I name it this user data, and this value we can add it here. For example, we need to add some information about the date and the user which create the request or send request for us. For example, I prepared two part of this information. I will use this and this two data for creating the beautiful array, Control C, I go here in the above this and here, Control V, for example, this for data and date, and this for URL. So I use this part of date and the URL for creating the session data. I name it this user data. I will here create the new array and name, for example, URL, this name, and this URL will be this function, these variables. I will copy this variable from here Control C, and added it here. For saving time, I prepared everything here, so I will use the $user, and after that we need to what happened, user URL and the next part of the array will be date. I use this from here, Control C, and add it here. For example, I say date and this date equal this variable, Control C, UTC date, Control V. So for saving time, we will here in this function we will use the session global helper. Also we can the request instance, but in this tutorial just use this function. If we call this function and here, for example, return this the session stored, okay, and call this. So if we call this function, for example, here, store session, let me copy this for casting, store session, Control C, and go back to the VS Code, and here we say Control V and hit enter. Not found. Store session, let me check this. This S is not needed here, and here hit enter. The session is stored. So in this by using this function, let me show you that we can use the session global helper, we can create an array. This array contain the URL, for example, or date, and also this array may be contain so a variety of information we need to gather about the request, but in this tutorial I will gather the two part of the session, two part of the information. I, for example, need the date which the user send request for us, and the URL which the user use for sending the request for us. The second the function we need to show the session. For showing the session, we can use this this request, for example, request session get. So I find this. We can use this session, for example, Control C, and added it here. For example, remove this, Control V, and we use the value, for example, here, Control C and Control V. We need here to create a request, and $$ request. Okay. For showing data, for display session data, we will use this function. So I go back to the here to the web and use the show, this Control C, and go back to the browser, and here I added it here, Control V, and hit enter. Now it's found for us. Show. Let me show that. Okay, my friend, I find my error, my mistake. I named the session is the user data, so I will copy this from here, Control C, and replace by the key the default name, Control V. So I refresh my browser again. You can see here the session is displayed here. The information of the session displayed here. You can see here in the VS Code by this user, by this function, we can gather some data like date and URL of the session, and create a new array by using session helper, global session helper. We can add this information in the file in here, in this storage, in the config. Let me show you that. Config, where is the config? Config, in the session PHP. All information we store it here in this driver, in this file, framework session. The next step we create the function here, show session. Where is this? The show session. By this function, we can show any session we created. We create the session user data, and by this helper get, we can show this data. The final work, our work, is the delete the session. For deleting the session, we will use the helper. We name it this forget. Let me show you that. My friend, as you know, and as I will mention before, for deleting any session, we will use this helper, forget helper. So I use this, I copy this from here, Control C, and added this here up by deleting this, Control V, and remove this from here, and not need this. Also, we can say here the session is were deleted. The session is deleted. Or anything else. And here we name add the name of the session, this name, user data, Control C, and add it here, Control V. And I will call this session by this route, delete session. I copy this from here, Control C, and go to the browser and Control V, and hit enter. The session is deleted. The remaining part of the information I like to tell you, if you like to the see all information about the session, we can use this helper, get session all. By using all, we can see all information about the user. Let me show you that. If I remove this from here and add this helper all, and by this all we can see, or we can watch all information, all sessions may be stored in our application. Let me show you that. By this we can watch all, we display, or we showing all information we maybe stored in our application. So I go back to the here and copy this show, for example, for saving time, Control C, and go to the browser here and copy and hit enter. You can see because we deleted the our session, it not displayed here, but we can see the token and the previous session, previous URL which user sent, because the latest request will delete this session here. If I go back and say, for example, store session, or let me go back here and check where is the web store session. This, Control C, and go back to the browser and Control V and hit enter. The session is stored. Okay, if we show all information about here, let me show you that. I go back to the here and use the show, Control C, and go back. I need here, Control V. All information about all session which is stored in our application displayed here. You can see here user data with the session we created in this tutorial, URL and data, and here the previous URL, the store session, and our data session. So if we use the delete session here, delete session, I think the session deleted. If we use the show here again and hit enter, you can hear the user data session deleted from our file driver. I think this is enough for this tutorial. Thank you for watching and forgive me for my mistake. Thank you for watching again, and I wish see you later in a new tutorial. Bye bye and God bless you.